Looking to promote your book online? Sunak Consulting has you covered. We will work with you to build a custom, interactive marketing strategy that will generate awareness and drive sales. Reach out to us today by calling 615-669-3269 or find us online at sunakconsulting.com. Be sure to mention this show to get 25% off your purchase.
My name is William Griggs, and this is the first episode of How to Write and Market Your Book. In this episode, we'll discuss how to author a book with Ruth Stevens. Ruth is an expert in customer acquisition and retention, and the author of the book Maximizing Lead Generation, a book she wrote to support her consulting business. Today, we're going to be talking with Ruth about why you should write a book and where to start, including idea generation, research, and maintaining a writing schedule. Lastly, we'll touch base with her on how to stay motivated throughout the book writing process. Enjoy. Ruth, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here, William.
Yeah, so tell us briefly about your background and what you're up to currently.
Thanks. I'm a consultant on business-to-business marketing. I've been self-employed for about 11 years now. I not only consult, which is sort of my core business, but I also do a lot of teaching, both corporate kind of trainings like seminars, but also in business schools here and abroad.
Gotcha. That's exciting stuff. So tell us briefly about your new book, Maximizing Lead Generation.
Thank you. Thank you. My favorite new topic. I have a copy of it to show off here. I'm very pleased with this new book because, for a couple of reasons. One is that it's priced at Amazon now at less than $15, which is so accessible. I just have no compunction asking all my friends to go buy a copy. So that's nice. But the other reason that I'm excited about it is that it serves as a kind of calling card for me and my consulting business. I, leave it behind whenever I'm visiting a client or a prospect, and it becomes a real, it sort of establishes my credibility.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So, lead generation is a fascinating topic, and it's something we're going to want to dig into in a future episode if you'd be willing to come back. But this is the first episode of a series called How to Write and Market Your Book. And the series we're going to cover today in this episode, writing a book from a co-author's perspective. We're also going to cover, or from an author's perspective, we're also going to cover co-authoring a book, marketing a book, and landing a book deal, as well as self-publishing. But the first things first, really, is why even take the time to sit down and write a book? What was your thoughts?
That's a great question because it is a real time commitment. And the first book I wrote, which was on trade show and event marketing, if you don't mind, I'll just show it here. It was published in hardcover about 5 years ago. This book took me 18 months to write. Mm-hmm. And the reason it took so long was that I was pretty new to the field. And I had to do a lot of research and interviewing and education to get myself to the point where I could sound authoritative and provide value on that subject. The lead generation book, on the other hand, only took me less than 6 months. But the reason is that this is my sweet spot. This is what I do every day in my consulting practice. I'm up on the field. I'm really knowledgeable, and I know what's going on, so assembling the content was much easier.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about the process. What was some of the, what are some of the benefits to writing a book?
Well, in the case of a self-employed person like me, it's a real establishment sort of your guruhood, if I can put it that way. It just makes me authoritative. It also attracts an audience. I have the book promoted not only at my website, but also I created a little mini website to promote the book itself, and I hope that website will get some traffic. I carry it around with me, and whenever I'm doing speaking engagements, I show the book, and it's really to promote myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what my business is about. The way I get business is by making myself prominent. Marketing services are difficult to sell to someone who doesn't already need them. So my strategy is to be a well-known consultant in business to business marketing, so that when somebody has a need for a marketing consultant, my name will rise to the surface and I'll get a call. I'll either get a referral or someone will find me using a search engine, or otherwise my name will arise. So speaking and writing are two really helpful ways to establish my prominence and my credibility, and have me be there when someone's looking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're talking about, being self-employed and realizing, hey, to actually get some business, it's not really knocking down doors, it's actually being known and pulling people in that way. When they notify or they acknowledge that they need some marketing services, you're top of mind. And you do that, like you said, through writing and through the book, and harnessing that book to, position yourself as a credible source or as an authority on the subject.
Hear, hear.
Gotcha. So, what were some of your thoughts around writing the book? Did you have any specific goals, or did you just use it to kind of support what you were already doing?
Great. I did. I of course I needed to differentiate this book from the others that are on the subject, and so I checked out Amazon to find out if I already knew everything that had been written on the subject, and in fact I pretty much do, because it's my field and I stay current. But the last end-to-end book that was published on lead generation in business to business was published in 2005. So it's now 2011. A lot has changed in B2B marketing in the last 6 years. So I felt comfortable delivering a book to the market that would be fresh and up to date. Now, 5 years from now, it'll probably be out of date, but that was the real point of differentiation. There are a couple of more recent books on B2B lead generation, but they tend to focus on one particular area, and mine is a soup to nuts end-to-end guide that helps marketers understand everything that you need to do to be successful in generating, managing, tracking, nurturing, closing, and understanding the ROI on a lead generation program. So that's the positioning.
Gotcha. So did you start off by thinking you wanted more gigs around lead generation, or did you already have that niche? Because obviously your book from 5 years ago has a different topic. Are you thinking this is your position, or are you thinking I want to be more positioned, or I want to be positioned in this niche?
Great question. I actually specialize in lead generation, so this was just perfect for me to focus on. The trade show arena was new to me, and I dug into it about 8 years ago or 7 years ago, because I noticed that in business to business marketing budgets, while lead generation is usually objective one for business to business marketers, often the largest line item in a B2B marketing budget is events and trade shows. And in my travels, I would be talking to VPs of marketing and CMOs, and I would occasionally ask them, so, how much are you spending on trade shows, and what are you getting for that investment? And I was horrified to find again and again that these senior marketing executives couldn't really explain the outcome of anywhere from, I saw budget percents as high as 40% of the marketing budget going to trade shows and events. The national average at the time was around 18.5%. So, but that's still a lot of money. It's a really huge investment, and if the people who are spending that money can't really explain what they're getting for it, I saw that as a problem and an opportunity, because I'm trained in direct and database marketing. So I'm all about closing the business, supporting sales, and demonstrating measurable results. That's what I'm trained in. So I thought I could really provide a service to trade show marketers. So anyway, I may be going on too far about this, but the reason I bring all that up is that it was a new area to me. I thought it was important in business to business marketing. I spent 18 months preparing, researching, and writing a book on the subject. But then, oddly, while the book is selling well and still getting enormous respect, and I still get fan emails about the book every now and then, but it didn't turn into a consulting source for me. And after about 2 years of realizing that I wasn't going to be hired to help people improve their trade show strategies, I sort of walked away from it. To the truth be told, I still have it in my arsenal, but there are various reasons why this has not proven to be a helpful line of new consulting business. So I'm very happy to be back in my my sweet spot with a book where I have most of my clients are asking me to help them with their lead generation programs anyway. So this is maybe a better source.
Gotcha. So you talked a little bit about how you did some research on Amazon, and you looked and you saw, hey, I read that book, or I know that book, or I know that author, and you kind of dug in. Is there any other tips you can give us for kind of doing a competitive audit out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, well, of course, Amazon is the number one resource for that. And any publisher, when you're pitching a publisher on a book idea, you're going to have to deliver a statement of what else is out there and how your book is different, and why the market may be interested in the angle that you're providing, different and presumably better. So another piece that can serve that need is talking to readers. People who might be prospective buyers, and generating some quotes about what they're looking for. Presumably, they're looking for something that you're about to provide, so that piece of, in effect, market research, not necessarily in a quantitative manner like a survey, but just a few interviews can I think, work wonders.
Gotcha. So kind of review what's out there, and then maybe dig a little bit more to help kind of support your case. Say, hey, I'm different, and these people want these. Maybe these people that have some credibility in the marketplace want this kind of book. So I guess the next step kind of seems to be, how did you come up with a name? Where does that fit into the process?
Yes, well, in this case, I should back up and mention to you that I was actually invited by the editor at Pearson to write on this topic. And she networked her way to me, and having written a ton on this topic already, I felt really comfortable accepting her offer to write the book. So she already had the title. But I supplied the subtitle, which is The Complete Guide for B2B Marketers. And fortunately, she agreed, so we didn't have to wrangle about that. The reason I suggested The Complete Guide for B2B Marketers is because the differentiation of my book is that it's complete. It's an end-to-end, soup-to-nuts guide. And the second is I needed to get the word B2B in there, because lead generation as a category is also very big in consumer. It's lead generation mostly for financial services like mortgage companies and insurance companies, or it's lead generation in online for, like, often it's called affiliate marketing and so forth. So I'm not talking about that at all, and I needed the readers to understand the difference. So the subtitle ended up being an important contributor, I think, to the.
Yeah, was there any back and forth with regards or any explanation from her about why she picked that title?
No. I just, I received the title, I liked it, and we didn't end up discussing it much.
Gotcha. And so we talked a little bit about, your time working with the publisher, and it's a little bit different because they actually approached you, which sounds like the best possible scenario. But can you tell us a little bit about the publishing process and talk to us about what it was like
What I think your audience might find interesting is that there really is a pretty standard set of processes. First, you create a table of contents with some pretty meaty description underneath. Maybe it's just bullet points, maybe it's a paragraph or two. And then you start writing chapter by chapter. And the thing that once my editor accepted the table of contents, I felt like, okay, I'm good here. I know where the book is going. I know about how many pages or how many words I want each chapter to be, because she had given me a word count and a page count. But the thing that got in my way was that because her publishing schedule was so tight, she asked me to submit chapters in batches of 3 instead of writing the whole book and delivering it as a bundle. And that sort of sounds okay. I mean, a lot of us work in this kind of manner on different projects. You put in a piece here and there. But the problem in the book arena with that, of course, is that I would be working on one chapter and realize some of the material I had already submitted that was duplicative. And I had trouble going back and making sure that I wasn't repeating myself, or worse, contradicting myself from chapter to chapter. And we were able to sort that out in the editorial process, the review process, but it was a challenge, a bit of a nightmare.
Gotcha. So it sounds like you say you kind of know yourself, and you know that you work best with a deadline, and they work with you to create this schedule. And the next step is that table of contents where you break it down chapter by chapter, and then you start to execute or actually draft some of those chapter outlines. And then it sounds like there's a review process at the end. Are there any other additional steps that we're missing so far?
Well, there are a couple of items that I was on the hook for that I really wish I hadn't been. And one is securing permissions. If I wanted to use an illustration or a case study or some other material taken from a third party, it was on my on my desk to go get a permission from the owner of that intellectual property, and that is just a pain in the neck.
Right.
But I also understand why publishers make the authors do it. There are really good reasons for that. On the flip side, I'm very glad to say the publisher took care of the index. Indexing a book is not fun, so I was pleased to be able to unload that piece of the process off on them.
Yeah, so just keep in mind when you're referencing other resources, whether it's graphs, charts, quotes, I guess, you got to get permission from the owner or the person that holds the copyright to that information. That's a good. Anything else that we're missing in terms of the process?
Well, there are typically in publishing two types of editors involved, actually 3 types of editors. This person, Catherine, that I've been discussing, is often known as an acquisitions editor, and it's her job to decide what subjects need to be covered and go find authors to cover them. Then there's a role I think it's called developmental editor, and this person was reviewing my work, my 3 at a time submitted chapters, with an eye to accuracy, completeness, logic flow, and she would write to me and say, gee, I think you ought to cover this here, or delete that and put it elsewhere, and other sort of big picture kinds of editorial feedback. And then there was a third editor who's known as a copy editor or a line editor, and that person did all the niggles of saying, this comma should be a semicolon,
Right.
and suggesting alternate words or phrases, and basically beating me up on grammar and sentence structure. And I'm the kind of writer who really welcomes that kind of feedback, and I often find that they simply improve my writing. I think there are authors who just hate it and wish they didn't have to deal with copy editors at all. So
Yeah. So what does the editing process look like? Do they take it 3 chapters at a time, or is it more at the book level?
It was a chapter at a time.
Okay.
And it's usually, or in this case, it was done in a dear old Word document using track changes.
Gotcha.
So it's fairly easy to see where changes were made, and it's really a pretty good system compared to the old days when it was red pencil on a sheaf of papers.
Yeah. So when you say that suggest changes, are they suggestions or are they changes?
This is a good point. I would guess that if I went to the mat on something, that I would win, unless there was some legal issue or some other good reason to overrule me. And I often objected to changes that were requested, but I always felt that it was only polite to explain and justify, back up my argument. Here's an example. I have quite a number of charts and tables in this book. There's a whole lot of data out there about lead generation, and people are really interested in that. So, but I felt that the format they were using to present tabular material was sort of weird. That it didn't make the tables as easy to read as they should be. So I asked them to make the headlines and the headlines more prominent in the table and use maybe a different typeface or bold or something. And I, as the author, really, I think in most publishing situations, that's really an editor's job. But they listened to me and were willing to make the change, and now the tables are much easier to read, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we kind of had an overview of the process from kind of beginning to end. But let's talk about your writing process. You had those tight deadlines for 3 chapters at a time. What did you find worked best for you? All-nighters or little bits at a time?
Great. Well, this is where it comes down to, are you a morning person or an evening person? And I am a morning person. So again, with a deadline, I can pretty much get stuff done. What I would do is, but I'm also juggling lots of balls because I write, I teach, I speak, I consult, and so in order to really be efficient, I needed to block out a couple of hours of dedicated time to work on the manuscript. So I would do that several times a week, and put it on my calendar and have that time and not answer the phone. Let the phone go to voicemail. But where I still struggle is with email because, I'm a slave to email the way many of us are. And I would have to discipline myself to avoid toggling over to my email inbox and getting absorbed in that stuff instead of sticking with the book. There's a famous phrase in the world of writing. I've forgotten who said it, but it was something like, the most difficult connection that I have to make when I'm writing is that between the chair and the seat of the pants.
That's funny.
Which illustrates the difficulty. Writers can always find something else to do.
Right.
Go to the refrigerator, Gee, that laundry I should really be doing that laundry right now.
Right.
It's tempting.
Yeah. So do you have any tips or tactics or tricks you can share with our audience about staying disciplined, staying motivated?
Yes. Go to a library.
Gotcha.
Go to a place. I actually have a number of friends who have written entire books at Starbucks. It's just good to get out of your distracting environment, and a library or another quiet environment is helpful.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts regarding setting up a structure or setting up a schedule to crank out those required chapters in the time you have?
Well, it's really a function of your working style. I have a friend, Jim Obermeyer, who also writes on the subject of sales leads, and he he, when he's working on a book, he will discipline himself by the page count or the word count, and he'll say, every day I'm going to produce 300 words or 1,000 words or whatever it is. And he would stick to that. So breaking it down into chunks may be a helpful tool for people.
Gotcha. So it either seems like, yours is time and solitude and, getting at it, and his is I'm going to do a little bit every day, and that little bit adds up to my required 3 chapters, and then those add up to the whole book.
Yes. Now, another formula I've been hearing a lot about recently is blogging. If you're blogging regularly on a particular subject and then eventually convert that blog content to a book, a year later of regular blogging, you might have enough content for a book. So
maybe some foresight to think about how it would flow and how the posts would connect to maybe a series on a specific topic, or maybe the variety of series make up a variety of chapters. That's an interesting thought process. Any other tips or tricks or any other items we can dig into for the actual publishing and authoring process?
I would say that if you are a well-heeled person, hiring a ghostwriter can take this whole process off your plate. And I have a college classmate who's a successful ghostwriter, and he writes books for executives who have a great idea and a lot of knowledge, but just don't have the time to write the book. So.
Gotcha. What is that? How does that interaction work?
He interviews the person and reads everything that they've read, and creates a draft and submits it to the client and gets it corrected. So, but it's an expensive process. My friend charges tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars for his services.
Right. Interesting. All right. So any other thoughts or potholes or trips that we can help our viewers avoid?
No, I think those were the... Oh, I know. One other thing. Not on the subject of potholes, but on the subject of where to get content. If you've created your table of contents and now you've got to fill in the blanks.
Right.
When I worked on my trade show and event marketing book, this one, see how thick this is? This book was, it was 340 pages. I interviewed more than 100 people.
Wow.
To create this content. This one, of course, mostly came from my head because I do it all day. Although I reference a lot of studies and a lot of material, but because the trade show and event marketing subject was new to me, people are so willing to share their expertise if you ask them. And I conducted an hour's interview with 100 people over this 18-month period, and it was through those notes that I got the material, and I quote all these people and credit them with the ideas that I got from them, and everybody's happy. They get mentions. In fact, one of the people I quoted quite a bit in the book, I saw her at a conference and realized that she was signing the book on the page where she was quoted.
Oh, that's awesome.
Everybody's happy.
That's funny. So talk a little bit more about that research process. What kind of resources did you use?
Yeah, well, the internet is so great. There's what I think if your audience is mostly going to be writing professional books versus, say, fiction,
right,
or and I presume that's your audience, right? Then what readers want, I think, is authority, and there's nothing more authoritative than research. So a lot of authors either quote research done by third parties. In my world, in business-to-business marketing, most of the vendors, the suppliers of tools and services in business-to-business marketing, are doing a ton of original research themselves to help them justify the purchase of their products. So that material tends to be widely available. It's easy to download, And fair use allows you to quote from it pretty liberally. So research reports and statistics gathered from third parties is a core piece of subject matter. And then that married with interviews from experts and experienced people can really produce a book without your knowing anything about the subject, frankly. You sort of act like a journalist.
Right.
And that can be another successful way to go at it.
Gotcha. That's interesting. So when you talked a little bit about the table of contents and putting that together, it seems like, did you then create another outline in the form of maybe a table of contents for each chapter?
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, it's known as a expanded table of contents or an annotated table of contents, and I absolutely did. I put and this ended up causing me some real pain later, but I did create 3 or 4 and sometimes even as much as 5 or 6 level outline in the classic outline sense of Roman numeral 1 and then 1, 2, 3 ABC, all that, because I wanted to make sure I didn't leave anything out, and because that would then become for the editors the taxonomy, the hierarchy of how the material would be structured in terms of typography. So the A headline, the B headline, the C headline, and so forth would sort of emerge naturally from that. I will tell you, there's this one chapter in this dear book on the subject of data. It's my chapter on the marketing database, which, as I mentioned, ended up with something like 7 or 8 sub-levels, and the poor copy editor finally threw up her hands and just said, "Ruth, you've got to reorganize this material because we can't have this many levels." And I understood what she meant, and so she actually gave me some good ideas for how to collapse otherwise material that I thought needed to be a subsidiary, and it finally worked out. But we had some hairy back and forth on that.
Gotcha. So talk about creating the table of contents, then creating a what was the term you used?
Annotated.
An annotated.
Or, annotated table of contents. It's really a detailed outline, the same way you do in school when you're preparing an outline for a paper or a research report.
Gotcha. And then you talked about a little bit about the writing process and kind of tackling the challenge of working with and structuring what you're going to do. But how did you go about tackling, let's say, chapter 1? You have your detailed outline, but where did you begin?
I didn't begin with chapter 1. I left that to almost the end. For, I think, pretty apparent reasons. I didn't know what kind of tone I wanted to use in chapter 1. And I also didn't really know exactly what was going to end up in the book and what the themes would be and the sort of the conclusions. And I, of course, would want to allude to those in chapter 1. So I started with, I started with the chapters for which I already had the most material. And here's why. The deadline for the first 3 chapters was so close. I really had to crank them out quick. And so I took the least resistant path. No surprise. And they were 3 random chapters that didn't particularly relate to each other. They weren't sequential. They were just the 3 easiest to complete by the first deadline.
Gotcha. So you started off, like you said, with some of the chapters you had the most information about. You have your detailed outline. Any other thoughts about actually cranking out one chapter and how to tackle that?
The first chapter?
Any chapter.
Or any chapter. Well, I was lucky enough to have written a lot about these various subjects. So in the case of some chapters, I was almost cutting and pasting. I was rewriting and expanding and reinterpreting earlier material that I had written for a study here or whatever. If you're but I do know, I've actually written a couple of books in my career, and I do know that if you starting with the easiest stuff first is really helpful, because that way you get a sense of accomplishment, and you've also got some results to show for it, so you feel good and it helps motivate you to keep going. But the other piece of what works for me is breaking it down into little chunks. So that's where the annotated outline is a real godsend, because I could say, okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to go fill in these 300 words that are required for this section.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's done, then the next day I feel good. I feel like now I'll go tackle another little piece and get at that. There's nothing scarier, they say anyway, than a blank sheet of paper.
Right.
So it's really helpful to be more filling in than looking at the big white expanse from scratch.
Yeah, so it makes sense. Like you're saying, get some small wins under your belt. Start with the easy chapters, the ones you already have the most knowledge on or the most information on, and get going from there. This has been a great interview. Is there anything else that I'm missing that our viewers want to know?
I thought your audience might want to know about money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that a subject of
go ahead.
interest? My trade show and event marketing book was published by a specialty publisher in Chicago that specializes in marketing subjects for professionals. He does not pay advances,
mm-hmm.
so I wasn't expecting an advance and didn't get one. But the flip side was that he was willing to let me buy. Oh, and he did pay a royalty, so I earned a small amount on each book sold. But the major thing that was really important to me was that he allowed me to purchase at a rock bottom price, basically close to the manufacturing cost of the book. Several hundred copies at the time of publication. And as I mentioned earlier, my objective in writing is, one, to establish credibility and authoritativeness, but two, to be able to have these books to hand out when I'm trying to do someone a favor or provide a leave behind at a meeting. So I wanted 400 copies of this book in my closet for that purpose. And if I have to buy them through the traditional author's discount, which might be 50% off list price,
mm-hmm.
it's good. This trade show book was priced at, I've forgotten what it is, but something like $60.
Wow.
Professional book, $60. So in a traditional publishing world, I would have to be buying these at $30. I'm going to be thinking twice about just dropping one on someone's desk and, or handing it out easily. So buying it at a fraction of that was really important to me, and that was why I was happy with those terms. Now, in the case of the Maximizing Lead Generation book, so you can see it's a paperback. I mentioned that it's available at Amazon for only $15.
Right.
I feel like I can buy that and hand it out until the cows come home, generally. But there was a pretty, I thought, substantial advance. I mean, I'm not going to retire on it, but at least I felt like I was being given a certain amount of cash to compensate the 6 months that I put into it. And I wasn't working full time on that for 6 months by any means. So there are different models out there, and as an author, I have to decide how I want to structure the deal. But a traditional publisher like Pearson, who published this book, is going to be paying an advance against royalties, and a pretty standard royalty percentage. I think it's 12.5% on net sales or something like that. I don't even know. But the net of it is, for me, it's about credibility. It's not about cash. I'm really not expecting to get rich. Not only not get rich, but not even get compensated for the time I've put into it.
Yeah, Seems like that's really, if not your main goal, should be one of your goals with these books, since books, very few of them make the bestsellers list, so very few people make bank on their actual book. Can you talk a little bit more about the advance and what that is and how that's typically structured, and then also talk about how royalties have been structured for you?
Yes, typically a royalty is going to be 10, 12, 15% of net sales.
Mm-hmm.
How you have to read the fine print in the contract, though, because how net sales is calculated or defined, how net is defined can vary, and it can be a real surprise to an inexperienced author.
Mm-hmm.
For example, the royalties on books sold at below a certain threshold, like bulk sales, are often cut in half. So if the publisher sells 100 copies to a company that wants to distribute them to their customers or employees, and you think, oh my God, I've got this huge sale, and then you find out that you're only getting half of the royalty per copy that you would have expected. Ditto on foreign sales. The royalties on international sales or foreign rights sales are often half
Mm-hmm.
of what you would normally get. The advance process is a total mystery to me. I don't know how publishers determine how much to pay in advance, but I do know that the publisher is not happy about delivering an advance that he or she doesn't think is going to be earned out. So if I haven't actually done the math in this case, but if they're paying me, say, what it might be $1 a book, I don't even know what my royalty is, to tell you the truth, because it's so immaterial, frankly. I haven't even looked at it. But say it's $1 a book, and say they give me a $5,000 advance, then they jolly well better be expecting to sell 5,000 copies, or they're going to lose on that advance. So that's essentially how the math works.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. So, and then you talked about against royalties. So, like you're saying there, they give you $5,000 up front as your advance. You got to sell that certain number of books to make that money up for them before they give you an additional.
Before you get a royalty check, you get a royalty statement at certain intervals. Oddly, Pearson sends a royalty statement every month. This other publisher, it's twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I sort of don't pay much attention to them. But until the advance is earned out, I'm not going to be receiving a check.
Gotcha.
So in that example I just gave, which is a bit fictional or hypothetical, until the 5,000th copy is sold, I'm not going to receive additional royalties.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Ruth, it's been great, and I appreciate your time. Where can people connect with you online?
Thank you. Well, my website is ruthstevens.com, and the website about the book is, no surprise, maximizingleadgeneration.com, where your audience can download a free copy of the first chapter of the book in PDF form, which, by the way, I should have mentioned earlier that I was pleased that the publisher gave me permission to offer the first chapter as a free PDF download. I think it makes the website much more appealing.
Mm-hmm.
I also posted at the website the expanded or annotated table of contents so that visitors could see in more detail what they're going to get if they buy the book. And interestingly, I also offered a link to Amazon saying you could buy the book here. The publisher came back and said, please also put in a link to Barnes & Noble, because we don't want to annoy our major distribution channels by favoring one versus another. So I went ahead and made that addition.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, to our viewers out there, you can find additional episodes of how to write and market your book, as well as other educational series on the startupslingshot.com. Ruth, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.